Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a couple of shoot 'em up westerns when I put Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter against Walter Hill's Last Man Standing. And man, this was a wild one to get through, man, because both of these movies are action packed and full of badassery. So let's just dive right on in to the nitty and the picky. First up, we have Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter. He directs and stars. This was probably his third film as a director, and it's kind of familiar territory for him even at this point in his career, because he's back to that whole man with no name, mysterious stranger rolling into a very fucked up town, for lack of a better word, and stuff, because of course that's what made him famous in those great Sergio Leone films, the Dollars trilogy, A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And here, this would kind of be the first time he really like kind of delved into like supernatural territory and stuff, because there's a lot of elements of that in this. It's alluded to more so. It's not like directly addressed, but he seemingly like comes out of nowhere in the heat waves of the desert and stuff and drifts into this town called Lago. And a lot of well, as soon as he gets into town, people are like, mouths agape, and they don't know what to make of this motherfucker. And of course, he definitely, makes his presence known. For all they know, just another dirty saddle tramp and stuff. And he does a lot of fucked up shit, and kind of low key terrorizing the town. He like drags a woman into a barn and rapes her for spitting at him and stuff, and then you know pisses off a bunch of other people, shoots a bunch of people while he's getting a haircut, and the barber can't even keep his hands straight and stuff. And of course, the only one that's really like just enamored with this motherfucker is the town midget that's always the butt of everybody's jokes. Well, he ends up making this midget the sheriff, and he gonna plan some kind of party, because of course the one thing looming over this town is there's a group of bandits that are getting out of prison, led by Jeffrey Lewis, who was a regular in a lot of Clint Eastwood movies and stuff. And so the film itself is intercut with them coming to the town, and of course they need somebody to like basically keep them safe. I mean, the last time they had a marshal in that town, he got his ass beat to death by those very same bandits that are coming back. And there's a lot of like allusions to the fact that Clint Eastwood's character may have been that marshal that had got his ass beat so many years ago. And of course, like there's a lot of great moments in the film. There are like some slow parts too, because of course, like there's a lot of stuff with the town. How can we get rid of this motherfucker? But no, we need this motherfucker. Like he basically clears out, makes the hotel dude clear out all of his guests and stuff, and tears down his barn to make a bunch of picnic tables and such. And does it really? And his biggest like grand gesture is when he paints the town red, literally paints the town the color red, and renames it Hell. And as a way of like kind of a homecoming for these bandits that are fast approaching and stuff. And when they get there, of course, pandemonium ensues. And that final ending when he's like riding out of town, and the midget, like it's like, yeah, you knew me before, and he's like, oh, that kind of shit. So there's a lot of allusions to the supernatural and stuff, and it's definitely a film that can be open for interpretation. But on the surface level, this is another good old Clint Eastwood shoot 'em up western. It's what he did. You honestly say it's what he did the best. But if we're being honest, that's the stuff he did that we have the most fun with. And then we fast forward to Walter Hill's Last Man Standing, starring the equally, if not more badass, Bruce Willis. And of course, Last Man Standing was about at least the second official adaptation or remake, so to speak, of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo. Of course, the first remake, or maybe we could say ripoff, of Kurosawa's Yojimbo was Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars, which is the film that made Clint Eastwood famous, not just, in America, but, internationally and everything. It basically made him a star. And it could be argued it was the $3 movies that made him a star. But, whereas like Fistful of Dollars is more of a straight adaptation of Yojimbo, it's pretty almost damn near shot for shot. Walter Hill kind of changes it up. The story's still the same. You got the same, instead of riding in on a horse, you get it's still technically a Western, takes place in West Texas, and it's now in the 30s or the 20s during the Prohibition era. And Bruce Willis comes driving into town, and Jericho is the name of the town, and immediately gets met with resistance. A bunch of motherfuckers like bust up his car and stuff, and then, of course, the sheriff, played by Bruce Dern, absolutely useless. I mean, he's on the payroll of both families that kind of run the town. The Doyles and the fucking Strasseys or whatever the fuck names are. They're not important. The only thing important is Bruce Willis's character plays both families from the middle, and much in the same way that Toshiro Mifune did in Yojimbo and Clint Eastwood did in A Fistful of Dollars. Only this one is way more action. I mean, right out of the gate. It's one of those things like how many bullets are in those guns. Who the fuck's counting? Because of the stylization of the action is insane in this. It's harsh and brutal. That he goes up to that guy and fucking at the beginning is that you fucked up my car. I was just saying, I'm a little low on cash if you pay for the damages, or maybe I'll just kill you. It'll hurt when I do. And he's stone cold badass. Another thing about Bruce Willis is the dude's not afraid to do nude scenes, because he's having a night with a whore played by Leslie Mann. They bust in on him while he's fucking, and he rolls out of bed, his cock swinging, two guns in his hand, shooting up motherfuckers. He don't play around in this movie, none whatsoever. And of course you got the dude that played Sebastian in Blade Runner as the hotel manager, and of course like he's he's absolutely brilliant in this film. And of course you got Christopher Walken in this motherfucker, and Christopher Walken was always good at chewing some scenery, and he's nothing short of brilliant in this film. And like I said, this movie's just way more action, way more fun. It's a fucking all around. For as many times as we've seen this story done, whether officially or unofficially, I would say, other than Yojimbo, Last Man Standing fucking just nails it out of the park, because it's like, it definitely will keep your attention going, because, it's damn near a fucking shootout every 5 minutes, and of course, like Bruce Willis's narration, usually voiceover is fucking trash, but, when you get the gritty quips of Bruce Willis, you can't really be mad at it, And so, I don't know. I got to give this one to Last Man Standing for a few reasons. First of all, Walter Hill is, in my opinion, a far better action director than Clint Eastwood. If we're being honest, Clint Eastwood was a lot better at directing like intimate, movies about either growing old or like very fucked up situations, movies like Heartbreak Ridge or Mystic River, something like High Plains Drifter. Honestly, I think, with the whole supernatural drifter element, I think he did it better with Pale Rider, if I'm being perfectly honest. And as an actor, if we're talking more badass, both Clint Eastwood and Bruce Willis are two action stars that, the less they say, the better. Because usually they didn't mince words, and they didn't, when they said something, it was badass, quippy, and really fit the moment, And I would say, although Clint Eastwood does have some fucking zingers in this, when that dude gonna sneak up on him with that knife and say, you're gonna look real funny with that knife sticking in your ass. Like, you still here? That shit like that, and just the way he just kind of owns the fucking town, that's fucking ballsy as shit. But I mean, Bruce Willis like fucking kicks way more ass in Last Man Standing than Eastwood does in High Plains Drifter. His is more of a mind fuck than anything else, as opposed to like Bruce Willis just fucking shit up, And then of course, it's one of those things. Is like the townspeople are a lot more ruthless. Like, one, you got a bunch of like sad sack, bureaucrat motherfuckers in High Plains Drifter. You just got a bunch of fucking ruthless ass gangsters who they don't trust each other, let alone the motherfuckers that they're mad at and stuff. So this round clearly has to go to Last Man Standing, because one, it's way more entertaining, vibrant, And it's no bullshit. Walter Hill, one of the greatest action directors of all time. Of course, with any director, is gonna have some duds. This was far from a dud. And not saying that High Plains Drifter is shit. I enjoy High Plains Drifter a lot, but if I'm having to pick which one I'm putting on, it's going to be Last Man Standing. So for anybody keeping score, that is 94 to 76. 70s are only up by 18 now. Like, man, the 90s have been on a bit of a streak, and like I said, one of the things that the 90s did well were fucking action movies, because where the 70s had great action stars and great action movies, sometimes the 90s, man, they outdid the 70s, because like their shit was just way more balls to the wall, fucking crazy, and didn't give a fuck, And it still had kind of a slower tone in the 70s. Not all the time, but most of the time. And this High Plains Drifter is a good example of that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this would be the last Western that Clint Eastwood made in the 70s. I don't think. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong, because it was 3 years later that he did Outlaw Josie Wales, and that one's way better. That's the best Western he did in the 70s. And of course, that's a previous episode, the Outlaw Josie Wales versus Unforgiven. You see Eastwood versus Eastwood. Definitely check that one out. And so, no, after Outlaw Josie Wales, he didn't do a Western until Pale Rider, which was in the mid 80s. So even by this time, the thing about it is, if he didn't have anything to say in a Western, he wouldn't do it, which is also admirable. A man that knows his limitations. But still, this round goes to Last Man Standing, 94 to 76. 70s only up by 18 now. The 90s, they be kicking that ass a little bit. So we'll see. My money's still on the 70s, but who knows, man? The 90s seem to be on a little comeback tour. And like I said, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. This is just one asshole's long, self-indulgent journey to see which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. And, my money's still on the 70s, but who knows, man? Shit's getting exciting. It's the middle of summer, and shit's definitely heating up. So, saddle up, partner.